Hello and welcome back to Vox Terra, and if you have not done so, please do subscribe and click the notification bell. Today I want to highlight for you a super important PBS documentary called Earth Emergency. And this Earth Emergency talks about the underreported fact that we are now entering an era of what are called feedback loops. Climate feedback loops, meaning as we have crossed the threshold of fossil fuel burning and added so many tons now of carbon and methane into our atmosphere, it's as if Mother Nature is saying, well, you really want to heat this place up? Let's heat it up then. And if people really understood this, I guarantee you they'd be a lot more eager to scale back on the era of fossil fuels. Well, the easiest feedback loop to wrap our heads around that we should all know and have emblazoned in our memory is what the loss of Arctic sea ice is doing. Well, the world's ice sheets and snowpacks and what's left of the glaciers act as the Earth's air conditioning system, reflecting heat off of our planet. And as that Arctic ice mass melts and shrinks, we are losing that great mirror, and more heat is getting absorbed into that dark ocean. And as that heat gets absorbed into that dark ocean, the ice heats further and melts further, absorbing more heat. That process is also known as Arctic amplification, hence why the Arctic is heating up at a faster rate than the rest of the planet, or one of the reasons. Another major feedback loop we should all know about is the thawing permafrost, and all that trapped and frozen vegetation and ancient animal matter. Well, as it thaws, ancient microbes are awakening, methane and carbon are being released into the atmosphere. Those are also heat-trapping greenhouse gases, adding to our fossil fuel emissions, heating the planet further. Number 3 we should all know about is the weakening of the jet stream. The jet stream is a major atmospheric river that used to stay pretty much put, circulating around the polar region, pinning that polar air in place, moderating the Earth's temperature. Well, as the Arctic is heating up more rapidly than the rest of the planet, we are losing that temperature differential between the north and the tropics. And those air circulation patterns relied on that push and pull from hot to cold. So now that pattern is getting sluggish, slowing down, and also slumping, getting out of whack. Hence why you see these cold Arctic blasts dipping deep into the southern areas they never used to, but we see all of this hot southern air pouring up into the Arctic. Well, that hot southern air pouring up into the Arctic is heating the Arctic even more, thus weakening the jet stream further and heating the Arctic even more, and heating the whole planet with it. Another feedback loop discussed in the PBS documentary is the forest die-offs and the loss of forests as what are known as a carbon sink, meaning the forests sequester all that carbon that have been adding to the atmosphere by the burning of fossil fuels, but now they're starting to lose their ability to do that and are giving carbon. Well, why is that happening? As the planet heats, the forests are becoming stressed. More forested regions are becoming susceptible to insect infestations because those winters are not killing off those insects as they used to. More of the vegetative regions of the world in general are going from these whipsaw-like hot or flood to drought conditions, and then these hot, dry conditions then lead to a situation where the forests, along with the insect damage they're receiving, are more vulnerable to burning. So worldwide wildfires have gone up. So the dying forests, through their decay, add to the carbon, as do the burning of the forest, adding more carbon to the atmosphere, losing their ability to sequester carbon, also adding to the Earth's heating that was set in motion by the excessive burning of fossil fuels. Now, also related to the loss of ice is sea level rise, and those warmer oceans then sort of encroach on the frozen ice sheets, melt them further. Hotter oceans also give up more moisture or more evaporation into the atmosphere, which makes the atmosphere in general more moisture laden. Water vapor is also a greenhouse gas, hence trapping more heat. Now, the feedback loop focused on here here in the video, the PBS show, wasn't really so much that, because one of the issues with increased atmospheric moisture is the variable of cloud cover and how increased or changed cloud cover is going to affect climate conditions. That's more of a wild card, but the link between increased heat, ocean heat, and water vapor and more intense tropical storms and hurricanes is well established. So that was what the PBS documentary focused on. Now, it also highlighted scientists, one in particular, who have been discussing feedback loops since the 1950s, as well as another scientist who cited studies going back to the early 1970s warning about feedback loops. And I'd like to point out that in an earlier video, I cited NASA showing that climate science, or man-made greenhouse gases through the burning of fossil fuels, affecting our climate. That science goes back to the late 1800s. So the main thing left out of the PBS documentary is, well, why isn't it being discussed? And for that, I would suggest you go to a website, a journalistic website called DSMOG, and they specialize in exposing what they call the public relations propaganda behind climate change denial, dismissal, and also climate inaction. And it all really comes down to protecting business as usual, which is the selling of fossil fuel and fossil fuel petrochemical products.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Environmental Coffee House. I have a very special guest, Vox Terra. Vox Terra is a very interesting YouTuber. He's got a small channel, which, as I like to do, we'd like to try to help him grow. He is a climate change, or what we call here, climate disruption communicator. But his communication style is, as I said, great for your nephew. Great for somebody who has no clue of any of the things that he just talked about in that video I played. So welcome, Vox. And we have a growing chat. I don't know if you can see it, but
I cannot,
welcome.
No.
Okay, so I will fill you in with any questions anybody has. Welcome.
That'll be great.
And how in the heck did you end up here?
Thanks a lot, Sandy. And you know what? First of all, I just want to thank you and a couple of your subscribers too, who actually comment on my show on occasion. And if I missed any of you guys because you commented recently, I haven't checked YouTube in a couple of days because it's generally crickets and some trolls. So I kind of space it, But I really got to thank Sandy here. She is so nice and so warm, and has been, I've been on the show maybe, I don't know, like 2 years, something like that. And she's been posting these like supportive comments, and it really keeps the morale up. It really keeps the morale going. And I don't know if you mind me saying, but you're actually my first and only supporter of Patreon, which is also a morale boost.
You would give me like $3 a month.
It's a morale boost because until you started doing this, like I've learned now the hard way, this is a heck of a lot of work. I mean, I remember first going on YouTube thinking, okay, I could explain this better. But then you sit down and you can't just poop this stuff out, I mean, you got to like script it and research it. And especially when you're like us and you're a dissident or opposition, you really got to have your I's dotted and T's crossed, because we really are going against that dominant thinking, especially when it comes to climate change. But as far as how I started here, so I want to start with, there's a poem from Langston Hughes, the poet, like a dream deferred. And I think it said something like, what happens to a dream deferred? Does it wither on the vine? And I don't remember the whole poem, but that's really how I feel about my life and how I feel about, our situation with the environment. So I can remember back in my early childhood, and I found a drawing I did, like this concept of the long-term survival of our species. Like it must go way back, because I was maybe around age 7, and I drew this sketch of like what do we do when the sun stops, burning? Like somehow, this is before I was thinking about climate change, but somehow I got the idea that the sun's going to burn out. So I had this drawing of this like fantastical machine that we're going to set up, and then And then I remember I found some other drawing I had of like some type of a more environmentally friendly city, like powered by rubber bands or wind up things.
Really?
So that was there with me really from the beginning. And I think I was initially influenced as a kid by, maybe like PBS documentaries where they would show, and I'm old enough to where we had those narrators like leftovers from the 60s, and where they had that voice of like, in the Amazon jungle, there is such a lush variety of
Like your
vegetation.
voice?
Yeah, I kind of influenced by it. Yeah. And I was
Yeah.
really dug that, and but then they would conclude with, except now the chainsaws are coming, and I'd be like, well, Kelly, no, don't do this. And dream deferred, here we are decades later, and the Amazon is it's worse than it was, and
Yeah.
ditto for plastic pollution.
Yeah.
And now, another early influence really different, I think, for most people who consider themselves environmentalists. And this made me almost really afraid to put on that mantle of environmentalism for a long time, until I learned, when I communicate with just average Joe and Jane people who aren't that into it, I feel like I get through to them. So I thought, what, I'm going to wear that mantle. But one of the things that held me back initially was I was always a space enthusiast as a kid, in addition to being concerned about nature and that kind of thing. And so I was reading Carl Sagan, and this must have been like the early 80s, I'm thinking, and somewhere around there. And I was reading about how we could terraform Mars and make it more Earth-like to have human habitation. And he's describing this technique of terraforming by introducing carbon. And he just said he wasn't talking about climate change, but he had said, well, we could heat up Mars by introducing carbon, the way we are inadvertently heating up Earth by this excessive fossil fuel burning. Now, I'm going back to when I'm like 10 years old or something, so it's hard for me to remember exactly.
Maybe.
But I thought, wait a minute, we're heating up the Earth, and no one's talking about this. Why isn't this big news? And sure enough, I mean, even recently, I heard Greta Thunberg quoted as saying, when she first started drilling down into this as a child, and she thought, why is no one talking about this? So I'll get back to the why, and you and I both know the answer. But so let me just work through my evolution. So initially I had this kind of a utopian thing, but then, I got swept up in the Reagan years, and I had a lot of trauma in my background. And so a lot of his like this conservative and this machismo, it really appealed to me. And and I might have even stayed like quite right wing, but I remember I was watching TV news, and I just paid attention to politics and stuff since I was a kid. I don't really know why, but I just always did. And I was watching TV news, and I saw, let me just grab a sip of this tea here. And I apologize, there's mouth noises. If I always edit them out, on my show. But anyway, so I saw these people protesting Reagan. And as this young right winger, my first thought is, oh, those protesters, rah. And then I saw, wait, they're protesting him about the environment. And I thought, I care about the environment. And then it started cracking a bit, it started cracking up. So then I started in the household where I was living as a kid, there was union newsletters around, and there was also environmental newsletters. So I started reading them. And out of that, I started drawing the conclusion that the Republican Party was more than the Democratic Party, dominated by what I'm calling now the reckless elements of the business community. And they were on this deregulatory, anti-working, anti-labor agenda. And I don't know if at the time, as I'm heading into my teenage years now, if I tied it quite together like I do now, but I think one of the reasons why I tie in labor, with the environment, even though they're not always on the same page, okay. But right. One of the reasons here is I feel like people's economic insecurity in our country and in a lot of the world now, people don't have time to step out of that rat race and start to think, what's the meaning of their life, what's the purpose of their life, because they're too stressed. And without having national health care, you can't afford some of this stuff. Even if you don't buy into materialism, like I try not to, some of this, unless you are a part of that grind, is just out of reach for you. And I think people need to be able to step away from that a bit. So that was the next part of evolution, where I started tying in that issue, where I saw a problem, in the Republican Party that I wasn't seeing as much in the Democratic Party. But so later, I think, where I started to really, well, actually, let me back up before I jump to the
And
next
keep
stage
that
of
the
my
mic
political evolution.
closer.
Oh yeah, thanks a lot,
Okay.
Sandy.
Yeah.
So when I'm reading these environmental literature and I'm listening, as a now somewhat politically aware, maybe teenager, I'm in that point in time. I started to feel like the environmental movement, it was really missing its opportunity to speak to people that this isn't just, these non-human animals. And I don't mean it to dismiss them. I completely am concerned about, the entire biosphere and the dignity for all life forms. But I think they're historically kind of missed that chance to say, hey, we're talking about, toxic chemicals that are carcinogenic. They affect our endocrine, disrupt our endocrine system, our nervous system, autoimmune. I mean, the whole shebang. I'm thinking maybe dioxin, when that was a big thing, and now with the plastics. And yeah, so it is. And so I really want to tie in, whenever I talk about climate change, I want to tie in for those people who are like, oh, climate change. I want to tie in, hey, dude, you know what? Stand behind that car or that truck and you breathe that in. You think that's good for you? It isn't good for you. Okay. So we environmentalists have, even when climate change, again, I'm going back to those 80s, when climate change was just kind of in the back as a blip for most of us, like a little, I don't know, a little like ding, ding, just gentle in the background. It wasn't moved to the foreground of the environmental movement like now. Even then, our agenda, I'm gonna say our agenda, it was the same agenda. It was this, all this excessive burning of fossil fuels. And I'm not crazy about nuclear energy either. And this consumerism and materialism, it's just pumping our biosphere, our earth, full of these carcinogens and toxic waste and particulate matters that are bad for us. So I feel like, that's what I always wanted to see it focused on. So again, that dream deferred, I wasn't active or enough a part of it. I'm trying to do that now on my show. So where I got to next, you start wondering, well, why aren't people getting it? Why aren't they seeing it like I am? And I think when I read, again, maybe it's in my early 20s now, and I read this author, which I'm probably heard of, Noam Chomsky, and he wrote a book, Manufacturing Consent.
Of course, we're all Chomsky.
Yeah, and that was such a life changer.
Cut our teeth. Yeah,
it really was, and he showed in there, if for those who haven't read it, and it's really Cold War oriented, but he showed in there, first of all, if I remember correctly, at the beginning of the book, he had like a table of what media outlets are connected to what other industries. And Noam was really more focused on, we call the military industrial complex. Like he was focused on those connections between the defense industry. And I don't know that he was in those days in that book environmentally focused. Now he is. So it was him. It was this other author, Michael Parenti, who I don't know if he's this famous in our kind of circles. And there was his book, I think, was called Inventing Reality. So it was a similar, kind of concept, like the invention of reality. And somewhere during that time period, maybe I took a political science course, and it had to do with like associative advertising. And so, reading this Parenti, Inventing Reality, Chomsky's Manufacture of Consent, and him kind of showing how our media, like you don't have to go to like far out sources. You could go, now in those days there wasn't the internet, so there wasn't this proliferation of like you and I could put stuff on, but
right.
But so could some YouTuber who's actually getting funding from these reckless elements, who seems all cool and slick, but really they're just fronts for them. So in a sense, there was only the corporate news media, and it portrayed itself in those days as trying to be neutral. And in a sense, it was kind of easier then, because we could say, hey, look, here's their connections to these industries, and here's how, like Chomsky showed, certain topics are just underemphasized, and certain ones are overemphasized. And in his case, it followed, he's following the Cold War. But you could apply that model to the fossil fuel industry and to climate change. And that's what I did later. But, I really saw then too, like about this concept of associative advertising and started looking at ads and how they target our identity. And I try to rise above that, but I'm not immune to it, but you can see something that's really bothered me again, because this dream deferred, I've watched this stuff for a long time, is, I remember the days of like subcompact, small car, and then it's like it's all forgotten in bigger cars and bigger vehicles and these ads showing, you got this massive not even a practical pickup, but a massive pickup that if you get smacked by one of those, you're going to be hurting. And they're marketed to people who they're not even in the building trades. Okay. They're not really.
Oh, I feel guilty. I have a pickup.
Yeah. Well, hey, it's okay.
I drag a lot of shit around.
Yeah.
I have a
Well,
homestead.
yeah.
I feel guilty about it.
Well, don't, because you know what?
Sometimes.
I'll tell you what. They part of it is just what we're stuck with and the system we're dealing with.
Well, that's
so,
how
for
I
example,
feel.
they didn't have to get so massive. If you look back to the pickups from earlier time periods, they were really slimmed down. So, and they were smaller and lower. So if you want to do your work and get your gear in and out, they're easier to climb in and out. Now, if you want to do some property maintenance or something, it's quite a bit to dig in and out of there to get your wrench or get your tool. But anyway, so I'm looking at that associative advertising and how these different commercial interests are marketed to us and become part of our identity. And then we get into the later 90s and I'm seeing how now I can really feel the climate change is kicking in. And I think it was in the 90s also when I'm thinking it was James Hansen who started saying, ringing an alarm bell, we need to do something about climate change. We can't, it's beyond just like in the background and a maybe.
Absolutely.
So okay, we're back to that. We need to do something about it, but it's not happening. And I'm seeing now, to me now, this weather, it's not like it was when I was younger, and I can sense that. And then now that I'm a little more sophisticated, I can just go to NOAA or I can go to the EPA and I can confirm that intuition was right. But I remember being out there in the 90s and trying to tell people, hey, this is we call it global warming now, a better name, another topic. And you're like, oh, they're looking at you like you're crazy. And I remember, watching the show. Yeah, I remember watching the show Sinbad. You ever watch that show Sinbad that was on for a while?
Well, I'm older than you, so my daughter probably watched it.
Well, anyway, it was from the 90s. And I remember he was talking about, this, it was like one of those hot winters, like when those hot winters were first happening, or those winter heat waves. And he's making this joke about El Nino. And I'm thinking, wow, is nobody going to say global warming? I mean, no one's going to say this. And it was really troubling. So I'm thinking, well, all right, I've heard a lot of climate activists for a lot of years saying, well, when we get the big enough heat wave, we get the big enough storm, people are going to wake up. But that's not going to happen by itself. And what I put together, and then later there was a book, same idea, was, I don't know if you remember the tobacco industry, and I forgot when it was when it came out, but it came out that they were, they're paying for false science, about the tobacco and the cancer. But but even more though, just because they don't want to stop that money train, and who does? I mean, everyone's wedded to their money train, but that needs to be exposed. And so, but it's worse than that. And this is what people I think are really missing and not generalizing this lesson is that, the media, in a rare self-introspection from what I remember of that time period, did some introspection and said, we weren't really covering this because we're getting advertising dollars from the tobacco industry. So we're not going, front and center with this, and we're putting out their propaganda. There was some kind of admission in the media, but that never happened with anything else. And I thought, okay, that's not isolated. That's going to be throughout every aspect of our economy. And this is why people are not getting global warming or initially man-made greenhouse effect. This is the problem here. And so I'd explain that, like voice in the wilderness here, but I would explain that to people who would listen. And and then finally we're going through the Obama years now, and you're hoping some things are going to change, but the changes, it wasn't much. And he was also
he's a neoliberal's dream.
And he's also placating that fossil fuel industry. So we're back to Carter with him a little bit, in that, okay, I'm gonna do some stuff with green energy, but I'm also gonna promote fracking, and I think this I never knew about so recently, apparently lifted some kind of an export ban on oil, allowing oil to become an export product again. So he did, but we were still ahead. But then when I tell people who then wanted to vote for Trump, Obama, they're both the same. I'm like, it isn't that simple, because what we've got with the Democrats is they're responsive to us, whereas Trump was given a big F, for just lack of a better way of putting it, a nephew unfriendly way, a big F you. Okay, we're part of a conspiracy, we're holding back progress, blah, blah, blah. Whereas Obama, he would never say that about us. And that actually means something, because then we're not getting demonized. But he would be responsive. Underreported as well are the accomplishments. Like, I remember reading the Sierra Club magazine, this and that, expanded this nature reserve, blah. So there were things happening, but he's not going, and now we got that with Biden, they're not going to go farther than we can lead. We, as in the environmental movement, we as in dissidents, however you want to call this, because, they're beholden, as Bernie Sanders would say, to their donor class, and they're not capable of jumping over that. They're just not. So Keystone XL was a hard fought fight, and a lot of activists put in a lot of energy on that. Initially, Obama wanted to be like, hey, you're not going to spill it on the roads, it's not being shipped, kind of look at the bright side of KXL. But we're like, no, this represents another dedication to the fossil fuel industry. I'm remembering there was issues with native sovereignty with KXL, and concerns about water contamination. So eventually he went along with us. Now Trump would never go along with us on anything. So it's kind of like, in my imagination, it's, to use like a battle metaphor or a war metaphor, it's kind of like gaining some territory. But the public, because the media is just so, it's all owned by these business interests, which are connected to the established business interests, they're just not seeing it that way. They're not seeing it the way we are. And you can hold their hands on it and kind of get them there. So I guess with my show, back to this like dream deferred business, I felt like my life personally, I've been pretty marginalized, and a lot of things haven't quite fallen into place for me, like you might imagine. And I'm thinking, okay, I can't just sit here not part of this. So as I'm seeing things aren't happening with Obama, or not enough anyway, I rejoined becoming active in the Sierra Club, but I started feeling like my niche really at this point is I just want to communicate these ideas directly. And
Which I think you do very well.
Thank you, Sandy. And I'm not super tech savvy, so at this juncture, so I just thought YouTube didn't seem too hard for me to figure out, so I just figured that out and started doing it. And I'll just tell you before I wrap up kind of my notes I had for your show, and then we can get into like a more of a free form. So what I'm hoping for with this show is, I chose this term long-term survival of the species because my initial sense is that a lot of these issues that people are really getting passionate about, they're not really that deeply held by them as they think they are. Like, if you look at some of your friends on Facebook, you're going to see one day or last year, and it could be on either side of the culture war divide with this, but like last year, they're really obsessed about something, and it's got to be this and got to be this, and that's all there is to it. But then the next year, the same set of people are flipping, and now it's something else. And that's why I resent that term sheeple, because really, as far as I'm concerned, you could apply that label to anybody, and including the people calling other people sheeple.
Yeah, I've been called a sheeple.
Yeah, and well, and before that, there was other insults tossed around out there, and and actually, just to play on that one though, and because hopefully I won't lose track of my train of thought. But your sheeple comment, I remember getting called "drank the Kool-Aid," and I don't really typically tangle up with people in a negative fashion. It just hasn't worked well for me when I've done that, but I thought, dude, who drank the Kool-Aid? I mean, we're talking about fossil fuels. This industry has been there since the dawn of capitalism. It's got influence in every government on earth.
Every single government.
But you're saying or maybe there's got to be some that it doesn't, but this person is saying a climate activist drank the Kool-Aid. So the Kool-Aid was an amazing. I wish that one was still around because I feel so ready for that Kool-Aid one. Because that Kool-Aid one, if you think about it, they're referring to Jim Jones and that death cult.
Oh yeah.
Well, those of us who want a greener, less toxic, less polluted economy, we're affirming life here, and they're defending business as usual. They're defending, wittingly or unwittingly, just more of the same, more plastics, more fossil fuels. They might not see it that way, but some of them do. And so who's drinking Kool-Aid here? Who's drinking that death drink? The problem is, though, this is worse than tobacco, because tobacco is a tragedy for those exposed to the secondhand smoke who get the cancer triggered. And it's a tragedy for the person who got hooked and addicted to the cigarette. But the tragedy wasn't biosphere wide, so it's a different animal.
You're going to kill yourself or maybe the one next to you, not the planet.
Yeah, exactly. And so I guess for what I'm hoping to do with this show, the points I want to maybe help people with is, okay, so why aren't these positive changes taking place? We discussed a lot of it with the media. So if people could see, though, if they could see the problem, there's another thing I think is so important. It's called market externalities, and it's such a fancy word. And I first heard New York's former governor, Eliot Spitzer, use it, and that could get you on a whole nother topic. But
I'm a New Yorker.
Yeah, it was really brilliant how he put it, though. And he described it exactly like how I would. So what we're talking about here is, let's just get back to that fossil fuel or even that nuclear power plant or that disposable plastic cup. That product does not include, and I'll borrow a line from this punk rock band, The Exploited. I used to be a punk rock fan. The death and destruction, and don't forget the chaos. And that was actually one of their tunes, Death and Destruction, don't forget the chaos. They weren't especially politically aware, like I am, but as a teenager, it was kind of fun. It was a fun lyric, and I could almost do the voice for you, but I never learned how to sing. I was like, death and destruction, and don't forget the chaos. And and us teenagers are like, and
were you in the mosh pit? Were you in the mosh pit?
We call them slam pits, actually.
Oh,
I was before mosh, it was slam pits. And it was fun. But the scene got weird in a bad way later. And so that death and destruction and chaos, those greenhouse gases, those endocrine disruptors, those neurotoxins, all of the ripping stuff out of the earth to make that throwaway cup, to put that gallon of gasoline there in your car or our cars to fire up that nuclear power plant, that uranium mined out of the earth. None of that's factored into the cost of the product. It's not factored into it. It's all subsidized, and that's just this daily subsidy that's not on people's radars. And so when people start getting into the environment, and if they're not thinking in these political terms and these power politics terms, then what's going to happen is you'll go to a meeting, and I've been to meetings where somebody will naively say, well, why don't we just, make them include the cost of disposal of the battery or the cup in the product? Okay, because what's going to happen if you do that, that sounds good to us at this meeting because we're thinking about this, but then there's going to be all these layers of disinformation out there and propaganda, okay, this stuff doesn't hurt you. That's dismissal one. And then the final fallback, which we see happening now, and this is where I'm coming back to the Reagan years and why I feel like I could talk a little more uniquely to people who identify as conservative, is what's happened is it's like the same with the tobacco industry. This final fallback is this stuff is harmful. You try proving it ain't. Well, okay, you're trying to take freedom away. This is a plot against freedom. And they're going to say that for everything.
Same shit.
So yeah, so it's really that's the thing. But if you could say you really want to keep capitalism, then you got to include the cost of that product. But then everything is going to get expensive, and the public then doesn't realize that, hey, this isn't a free ride. There's no free lunch here. We got a cancer epidemic. We don't even get what it's doing to our endocrine systems, all these toxins and pesticides. But if they got that, then you could have change. But they need to see that. And back to climate change, and then I think I'm about done with this. What my notes here is what I feel the environmental movement's missing as a whole is just
Keep your
and this
mic
isn't
closer.
thanks, Sandy. This isn't our fault exactly, well, I'm kind of marginalized, like small fry here, but what I feel the opportunity really missed, and this should be the media's job, this should be the press's job, is all these extreme weather events, which are so obviously kicking in, those climate change mechanisms should just be brought up. And why they're not, the main thing I'm thinking is because of that power of that fossil fuel petrochemical industry in our media. Another reason, though, and this was highlighted in a book. It was a novel, but it was written by an author, I think Naomi Oreskes.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And she is a scientist, and she wrote a book, Collapse of Western Civilization. And it wasn't like, I thought it's a cool title because it kind of gets into these people who are like right wing or under assault. Well, actually, the real assault here is these industries destroying our biosphere. That's the real assault that you're being misdirected from. So I thought in a way it was kind of a clever title. I don't know if she meant to grab that audience with that title, but she pointed out, in addition to like what I've been saying, what's happening in the Republican Party, and the fact the Democratic Party, other than with the exceptions of like, Bernie Sanders, maybe Ro Khanna, some other people, they're not really that able to offer true leadership because of their donor class, and they just don't know how to articulate.
Bingo.
With those exceptions, another problem with the media, what's happened here, despite that like denial, that paid for denial and all that, is the way science is set up. And I'm not talking about corporate sponsorship of science. That's another interesting issue. What I'm talking about here is just what she pointed out, is the scientific consensus. They need something like, it's like a 90% certainty rule. And here, I'm paraphrasing my understanding of it, but I can tell you I'm pretty much in the ballpark. So before attributing causation, they need like 90% certainty. So that's why you and I or me anyway, because I've been watching this, it's been on my radar since the 80s. Why isn't it getting connected? So you'll get a scientist, well, the periodic blah, blah, blah. And this like, so, and that actually was kind of like, they sort of did that in that, what was that movie? Don't Look Up. You had somebody, well, with this asteroid could blah, blah. So you get this nitpicking, hair splitting, because they're really trained for this exacting way of thinking. And the general public is not. We don't get that in our education system. I think our education system is it's way too fluffed out.
It's gonna get worse.
Yeah, we don't get it. It's fluffed out. So then in the reporters, the politicians, everybody is a product of the same media environment, the same education system. So now somebody comes on, I'm just going to be a little kind of making a joke about, like, Egbert comes on here and like, well, that's, they're just like, okay, snoozer. I don't know what the frick this dude's talking about. And now it comes on, oh, come on, it's not real. It's just real. Oh, they get him on the air. So, that's really part of the problem. So what I advise doing, and what I've been saying for years, and is instead of, if you can't exactly pin it down, what you can do is you can say, okay, the planet is heating. This is set in motion by the excessive volumes of greenhouse gases being dumped in our atmosphere. I think on my earlier shows, I said, no, it's like something 40 billion tons annually. People don't know that. That's not highlighted. That's a freaking lot, 40 billion tons. And I just tell anybody, even when I was younger, before I knew it was 40 billion, I'm like, just look at all these cars, look at all these trucks, and 7 billion people. And I'm not talking anything about, I think it's more lifestyle than numbers, but it how can that not do something? It has to do something. So, so I just feel like if you show that, so back to the science thing. So even if you can't say, okay, the Earth is now, I think it's roughly 2 degrees hotter than at the start of the Industrial Revolution. I think it's 2 Fahrenheit hotter. I think that's roughly 1.8 Fahrenheit.
Your
The NASA website.
Perfect.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Cool. So let me know if it gets too close or too far. And
it keeps changing.
So we know, and it's been known for a long time, that these some basic climate mechanisms, and and these could be tied into every one of these extreme weather events. So one basic mechanism is the hotter atmosphere will hold more moisture. So that means now it's going to hold on to it longer before it's going to let it fall out again. So now it's charted, it's shown there is an statistical increase in extreme precipitation events, be it snow or rain, extreme ones with that hotter atmosphere. Contrarily, because it's going to hold on to it longer, if you're in an area that's already prone to dryness, that dry condition can linger longer. So that's a known. Another known is that these atmospheric and oceanic currents are heat related and cold related. So they've historically had that push and pull from that freezing Arctic to that hotter tropic. And as we get into that heating Arctic now, heating faster than the rest of the planet, that will throw those weather patterns off. So now maybe the system will just linger in place and just keep dumping that rain, So those mechanisms can always be shown, even if you can't say, well, statistically, but actually I've been reading, and I haven't done a show on it, but apparently what's called attribution science, as they call it, is getting much better now. So they actually can say, well, this heat wave wouldn't have happened if not for the introduction of all these billions of tons of greenhouse gases. So now 2022, they're getting better at it. But going back decades, it's understood there's basic concepts of what a hotter planet will do. And that could have been being connected. The most pathetic, what always got me, was a heat wave, a blazing heat wave, especially in the winter. And why the chicken squawk? I say, it's your nephew can listen, so I won't swear. Why the chicken squawk?
We all swear, but
Well, I almost think it's this funny.
We
swear
want
would
this
better.
For kids.
You remember Foghorn Leghorn? Remember that guy from the? I always loved his folksisms and all that. But as far as for kids go, Sandy, that gets another thing with YouTube. How they really. That'll be another interesting thing about how they gave a lot of YouTubers a scare with that COPA stuff and about if your show's for kids. Anyway, that's another topic. But you can tie it in. So one of the things on my show is I try to regularly, tie it in, and I also try to regularly expose those moneyed interests, and that's two things. So because a lot of people will say when you talk about this stuff, especially if you tie it back to the wars, and you start questioning, well, are these wars self-generated to benefit an industry? Then you're going to get into people, and if they're not reading Chomsky and all this, you're like, well, they would never do that. And then I just say, look, a financial interest clouds everybody's judgment. There's no way for it not to. If you're making $20 million a year because you're CEO at a defense contractor, or you're making $20 million a year at one of the fossil fuel majors, how is it not going to cloud your thinking? And you're growing up in a media environment that doesn't highlight any of this stuff for you. So it's very easy for you to believe all of it and then self-perpetuate it. And then you're going to donate, and then you can, gosh, they can even influence education. There was I heard a thing recently on Living on Earth. Well, they have been all along because this lady interviewed, she wrote a book called, I think it's called Misinformation. So that group you and I mentioned before, the Heartland Institute, who's one of those, according to DSMOG, like a fossil fuel, or I'll call it reckless, business elements think tank. according to her, they actually sent out like a packet of information with CDs to like all the science teachers or all the, something like that. So they're going to get this in the mail and have no idea what this is. And it's going to be slick and well performed. And, oh, it's cycles, the earth cycles and blah, blah, blah. And meanwhile, on the other side is you got a scientist who can't really communicate with the public because they're so trained in this exacting thinking. And then you've got people like us who are just scrabbling out because we can see this, and we're just scrabbling here. And we're not going to get funding by who's going to fund us, especially if we're going to be, this critical of the system. I mean, where are we getting funding from? So okay, you could have these solutions because there's a lot of good solutions out there, like really simple stuff. Like, for example, having more vegetation along a stream bed is going to filter out some of those toxins. I mean, there's these things that are newer to me, like geothermal heat pumps, which apparently you can heat and cool your home with really minimal energy, just tapping into the stable earth temperature.
Very expensive, of course. Cost prohibitive. Not
right,
even
and that
$40,000 for my house.
Right, and that gets exactly, Sandy, and that gets us to, and let me just have a sip because my throat is getting sore here.
Oh, you're doing great.
That gets us to those good old market externalities. So, and that whole unknown lobbying garbage. So I could do a show highlighting, or you could, geothermal. And then our viewers, are going to be bummed out because, $40,000 here to dig these wells. And that's really a pile of crap. But the only reason this is cheaper or so expensive compared to running natural gas to your home or whatever, is because that natural gas doesn't have to pay for those market externalities. It does not have to pay for the greenhouse gases. It doesn't have to pay for those fracking chemicals. It doesn't have to pay for all the toxicity along that supply chain. You dig those wells, you pump that stable temperature. It's a done deal. And it's similar situation with wind turbines. And I know they've got a lot of bad press, but a lot of that bad press is coming from, you look at DeSmog again, and I found an article from them, or maybe it was the Guardian News, that a lot of that anti-wind packages that will come to people when the wind turbine wants to settle in their neighborhood, a lot of that, the seed money initially at least, was from the Kochs. Okay, they because you got issues with wind turbines, you got issues with solar panels, but you set them up, and it's like geothermal. Once you set it up, you got a blade spinning, you got a panel sitting there, it's doing a solar voltaics, however it works. You got a tube in the ground, and then you got passive solar heating. You got all kinds of stuff that's not really even talked about. You got building orientation. I mean, there's so many creative solutions out there that are just not getting looked at because these other industries, and they all seem cost prohibitive, these other industries are artificially cheaper. They're just artificially cheaper. And that's what people aren't seeing. They think this stuff's expensive. No, these things are artificially cheaper. So the free market, it isn't really working. So if you want to fix it, you got to make these other people pay the price of what stuff costs. But then you're up against all this lobbying and disinformation to stop every innovation, to keep the regime of fossil fuels and nuclear and these big heavy hitting plastics and the pesticides, to keep these things in place, because organic food should not be more money than pesticide laden crops. That pesticide laden crop, which your grocer is going to call conventional, why not call it pesticide and herbicide laden? It's not paying for those migrant workers who are getting paid some crummy wage, getting bullied around when they're in the countryside. You're not one of us, you don't belong here. And they're not really getting a good wage. It's not fair to them. It's not fair to the people who live in the country who maybe want to work on a farm if it paid decently. Who are born there, live there, aren't migrant. And also, those workers are going to get cancer. They're going to get other health effects from working with these pesticides. That's not being paid for. We're eating it. We're getting sick. It's not being paid for. So none of this stuff is cheaper. Shipping produce all across the planet, that's not
crazy.
cheap.
That's
that
insane.
should be super.
We
right. But
need to
then we
eat
want to do,
local.
yeah, and we want to do the right thing. And we're going to go to the store and I'm going to buy organic food. Unbleached cotton is a really cool thing. I remember back to the old days, even when before global warming just sucked up everything. And it needed to. It needs to suck up everything. But none of this stuff should be more money. It should be cheaper. I mean, when we were on the trajectory of like smaller vehicles, electric vehicles way back in the day with Carter, that never should we never should have gone off that trajectory. And then again with the artificialness of this market, this so-called free market that isn't, well, think about those auto industry bailouts. Those big auto majors were going to go out of business on two occasions that I can remember. Like in the 80s,
Bailed them out.
and we bailed them out. And what do?
There we
And
go.
I think both reasons were tied in with expensive gas prices, definitely in the 80s, because people were like, I want smaller cars. But I think even the other one was the other one, 2008, I'm thinking with Obama, somewhere around there when they were bailed out. And I'm thinking even that
Yeah.
one was what was going wrong there. But what do they do with that money? They then use that to put out ads to make these really puffed up trucks. Okay. And I don't begrudge anyone earning a living. Now, for someone I know who's in property maintenance, that person is better off with a sedan because you can just get the tools and out. Easy. The truck's just too much work for what that person's doing for climbing in and out. But okay, you need a truck, fine. But they could have been running on electric all this time, or we could have been putting R&D into that, and they didn't have to be so puffy. I mean, that nose on those things is huge. So they use their money to then, people think they're choosing this freely, but they use their money to create advertisements, to create associative advertising that are going to connect driving that truck or that SUV or whatever with being in nature, with being a farmer.
Oh,
When
sure.
I'm
All
seeing
those ads.
and I'm seeing people who so they're taking advantage of our disconnection from nature while destroying nature. They are marketing to our disconnection from nature to people who, maybe aren't really seeing the big picture here. And then that's just associative imagery. So you just have, these are all operating out at the level of feeling. So that's real manipulation, because if you want to have a clean system, those ads would have to be, this is why it's practical, but it's not. This associates this product with something you want. This associates you with safety, with nature, and that's what they did with that money. They manipulated the public. Then they were able to lobby. They're able to lobby the government so that the fuel, keep holding back fuel efficiency standards. Trump gleefully went along with that, like rolling back fuel efficiency. But they were always able to get carve outs, and that that's really the big manipulation. And that's what holds it back from positive change happening. So it's not an easy solve, because it's like an alcohol problem or a drug problem or a substance problem. If the person having it is just waking up and they're irritable with the people they're living with, and they're thinking, it's not this alcohol I had. It could be the alcohol, it could be the people they're living with. But if someone's up all night drinking or on crystal meth or whatever, and the next day now they're dealing with their people, whoever they got to deal with, and they're just like, you are I know I'm on, you're a jerk. Well, part of it is that substance that's kept you up all night talking. So people need to be aware of how our systems are manipulated by who's ever got enough ducats or money to manipulate the system. And if they can be aware of that, then they can see, yeah, actually the solutions are cheaper. And what I'm hoping is that people start putting their brains towards, okay, how do we get more sustainable? Because to me, that's job one for the long-term survival of our species. It's, and actually go back to COVID, even that could have been tied back to climate easy enough. I did a show, but this was before I had visuals, and boy, it was amateur hour. So I don't know if I'm recommending anybody to go back and watch that one.
Oh, I think you're getting better.
Well, because I changed some software. I started putting pictures in there. But earlier, yeah, I couldn't do anything. But there was a great.
Started out like that.
Thanks,
I
Sandy.
didn't even know what a live stream was in 2014.
I don't know either yet. I mean, I know you're doing it, but,
I didn't even know what one was.
Yeah.
Until Facebook.
Yeah, and so this article in Environmental Health News, they broke down, and then I broke it down. that's one of the things I like doing, is just breaking it down into here's what you got to know. They broke down how climate change, how global warming, I really prefer that name, is really it's exacerbating, it's changing the spread of disease vectors. And so you can look at, so COVID could have been a big environmental lesson easily, but it wasn't. And I'm thinking, because making one would disrupt those industries. So the lesson could have been, you heat up the planet, all the life forms are getting on the move now, and the disease vectors are changing. So COVID's, it's really hard to pin down where things started, but again, there are knowns already. So there are knowns about the mosquitoes changing range. That's because of the heating planet. That's a known. So anybody could just say, hey, well, we're not quite sure how COVID is suddenly getting a new foothold, but we do know the heating planet has made new footholds for, I think, other weird diseases like Zika and West Nile, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So we do know that. We do know that mosquitoes that used to inhabit this region are now inhabiting that region. Ticks bearing Lyme's disease and some other diseases, that's another big one too. Their range is changing. So that's a known. We also know that's direct climate change. We also know that deforestation, which, okay, fossil fuels are the driver, but deforestation gets rid of the sink. And then those dead forests now are decaying and adding their carbon or back into the atmosphere, or methane, depending on. So we know the deforestation, not only does that add to this heating, but it also is messing with all those simple life forms. Now, where do I go? Where do I live? I got to come here. So now this creature, let's say a bat or something, it's got this disease, and now it's suddenly in the village. It wasn't in the village before because the forest is gone, and now this person gets bit, and now they got to keep earning a living out there chopping down the trees, and before you know it, now this thing's spreading around, this big global unnecessary
it's a vicious
trade
cycle.
Yeah, but and they could have been highlighted. That could have been the lesson. That vicious cycle, the factory farming, disease. I mean, those pigs in those crowded conditions. That one really gets to me. They're just disease breeding grounds, and it's not just those poor pigs, but it's breeding grounds for new diseases. And actually, when I was looking into this stuff with COVID, and I really was hoping society was going to learn some lessons out of it. And I remember looking into it. Okay. Yeah. And I know, sure. Because it felt like there was some hope. I saw these articles like a greener economy builds more jobs, and we shouldn't restart fossil fuels. And so I remember looking at like a Spanish flu actually wasn't started in Spain. There's some thought, and it's a Scientific American article, it actually started in America. It was like some kind of farming conditions. So these diseases, when these animals are crowded and stressed, they're then these different viruses and things are coming into contact, and they somehow, cross-pollinate. That's not the right word, but so again, you've got the heating planet, the deforestation, the factory farming, and I'm not against global trade, because I have this I really don't care for prejudice, and I don't care for people like us versus them mindset. It doesn't, maybe it floated my boat when I was really into this Reagan stuff, but it doesn't float my boat now. That's when you
were young. You didn't know any better. You were probably, influenced by your surroundings.
Well, I was, and it was actually, so, it's not just that I know any better, and here's how I do have, and here's how, and I guess maybe we got to sort of leave this other train of thought, but I'll just wrap that one up. So what I'm trying to say is all these calamities, including the diseases, could all be tied back to what's happening with our environment. And you don't have to be able to nail it down. You just got to bring in those basic causations like heating planet, change of disease vector, So with the Reagan years, for me, it was a little different than just not knowing better, because I started off like kind of like, for lack of a better word, like a utopianist. I had this like scheme for how we're going to survive on Earth after the sun burns out, and these rubber band propelling methods, so we're not burning energy, fossil fuels. So what happened for me was like basically like we used to call like a broken family, or a dysfunctional family. We used to call it that way in the old days before blended. And
no, we still use that, dysfunctional families. There are
and so I picked up on because I'm looking as this kid, like, how do I keep my head together here? So I'm hearing this like strong voice of Reagan, and then I'm watching these televangelists, and
Wow.
it's all really sounded good to me.
Televangelist, really?
Yeah. So it was all really sounding good to me,
Oh,
and
holy
I'm thinking
shit.
like, okay, so I'm getting into this way of looking at the world now at that age as liberals, and this is before I saw those people protesting Reagan about the environment. Okay, it's before that. So I'm seeing liberals as, they're disorder. They're like social disorder, and the people I was raised by, if you want to call it that, they're falling into this disorder because they're not willing to abide by these loyalties and these traditional loyalties, and they're seeing themselves as like they're so much better than the past, and they're stodgy old parents, and they're just throwing away everything that was like nice and felt stable. And I'll tell you, I had a grandmother, and I don't exactly know her politics. But she was this like paradigm of what you'd imagine like the orderly household, And boy, if it wasn't for her, I don't really. I think she kept me from, really becoming like a wayward youth beyond going to mosh pits, but like getting into real trouble. And I think she was kind of like an anchor. So you know, I what I think a lot of people don't get on the who see themselves as liberal is that people who are sincerely conservative. And now the conservative is a lot different now than when we were younger, some years ago. And I'm, I don't know if there was like the way it's manifested now. I don't know,
You
maybe it
mean
wouldn't have
the
had it.
Marjorie Taylor Greene conservative?
Yeah, yeah. Maybe the way
The
it's
asshole
manifested.
contingent.
They're really rough. Okay, they're really rough,
They're
and it's
really
like there's
rough.
some over the top macho stuff that's, it's like, I mean, gosh, why would you even want? I mean, it's like if you ever hung out on the streets, like and as a teen, I'm good. You don't act that macho. You just like Teddy Roosevelt philosophy here. You speak softly, carry a big stick. You don't walk around like you're looking for trouble. And some of this really pumped up stuff I'm seeing now, I don't see it. I can see Reagan laying the foundation for this stuff for sure. But, a lot of those televangelists, like I can remember Billy Graham. I mean, he was like a nice guy. And this stuff would not, it's just, there's a disconnect there. So what I'm trying to say is if you to speak to people who see themselves as conservative sincerely, which I think I can do, and I think it's really
Okay.
necessary, because I don't think we're going to get anywhere as a species if it's two camps so succinctly
Right.
drawn.
I see
So
what you're saying. And
so
you
you got
have
it.
that.
If you got a little in you and you're sincere about it, you need to be able to dive right in there. You can't be like in a negotiation, everything you think is wrong, dude. Everything you think is wrong. And you know what? Team left or liberal is right about everything. I've got friends like that, and it's maddening to me because it's like I don't know how you can really think everything is right about everything. There's always going to be a give and
It,
take. So I just
it's
want to
not.
tell people who, like, I had a great conversation with somebody who's maybe like I was when I was younger, and he's more seeing this because you need to see this like the way we saw this, or I wasn't really that active, but the way it looked to me at the time was like you've got these like forces of disorder, but the way it looks to the liberal when I switched to the more liberal, but I never fully went there, is we're standing up for rights of oppressed people. That's what we are doing. You're harassing them. So it's really, but it's really two different outlooks, and on the social culture war, could be a little give and take here. So what I just said to a friend of mine who were maybe more associated through business or that kind of thing, but I had said to him, he was a preacher in training, and he even told me he voted for Trump. And I said, look, let me tell you something, because he was a nice guy. He wasn't like one of these like kind of people. And I said to him, because we're telling him, look, I said, the biggest thing is what's happening to our environment. And the Republican Party is locked up by that fossil fuel industry. And he said, well, let me make a conservative argument about climate change. I said, no, just stop right there. It's not a conservative argument about climate change. That is the reckless elements of the fossil fuel petrochemical industry putting on a conservative cloak that is associating themselves with some things you may hold dear to you. But that's not conservative. You got to disentangle that. And that was really one of the things I loved about Bernie Sanders. He of 20 of the when he was running against Clinton,
Loved.
the 2020 Bernie Sanders was a little more okay, everything liberal. But the 20 was that 2016, right?
Oh yes.
So the Bernie
I
of
was a
2016,
big activist then.
I was always campaigning for that guy. So he addressed Brigham Young University, and he cited from the Bible about, he said we can disagree about some of these social issues, but we're going to agree how the Bible stands on wealth and these power inequalities, and that's all right in there. So, in the left thinking, like now I'm talking about like the true left, which is, we're talking here, like Karl Marx wrote this book, The Communist Manifesto, and it's really not covered well in our country at all. But his basic idea is history is this history of a class struggle. So he put the religions in with that, kind of looking at how feudalism, it's tied together with religion, divine right of kings, et cetera, et cetera. But what I think he was missing, and I think a lot of my friends on the left I've debated with are missing, is that really it's what's emphasized. It's what's emphasized in that religion. Because I think if you read, let's just look at the Bible holistically with an open mind, it's not going to really get you to a liberal point. I don't think that's really fair to try to jam it in there either. But it's not going to get you to where the conservative movement has been taken by these reckless elements of the business industry. It's not going to get you to these vast wealth inequalities. It's not going to get you to let's cut the taxes on super wealthy people. It's not going to get you to you got to do some mental gymnastics to say the Bible is telling you not to have a national health care program. To tell you the Bible is telling you to go bomb Iraq. You got to do some mental gymnastics. And if you focus on those under preached about, like that was I don't know if you got a chance to check out my show, but this one I think some of your viewers would find really fun. It is, I think the thumbnail icon was like, maybe like what they don't, I think God's warning. Maybe I just went straight to it. It was like God's warning. And I went straight into some biblical passages that are underreported. I think I titled it like what they don't preach about. And so that was a tactic, rather than, I don't really feel the need to disagree with everybody on everything. I just want to get people, let's look at that long-term survival of our species. You put that in context, and I think a lot of this other stuff, there could be a bit more. Hey, this
God's
is how I'm
warning.
About this situation.
Is that the
one? I think it's
I'm
really fun.
I'm going to show your channel really quickly so everybody can see it. Let's get that up. That's your channel there. Vox Terra. See, you need more than 246 subscribers. I think that you appeal to a wide variety of people. You're a teacher. I do believe that, but you could appeal to high school, the high school level, and I thought when I looked at everything, but you have a lot of stuff on here, and I started seeing you. Oh my God, way back. Look at how everything changed. But I watched, and I've watched you. I don't always comment. I don't comment on a lot of things I watch, but subscribe to his channel. Help him out.
Yeah, no, like I said, you're one of those people who have kept me going with this, because it's been a slow slog, and you've kept me going. I'm going to say go on there, and there's, I mean, you're not the only one, but you're one of the biggies who
but we're tough here.
Nice stuff, Yeah.
But this is a tough crowd, and we tend to feel that the term WASF, you know what that term is? It's one of those terms.
I feel like I should, but
well, if I say it, it won't be it'll be an R-rated show. But
we'll just sign it out or something. I kind of, now you got me curious. But actually, speaking of your subscribers, you're
so sweet.
Like who's on today? Who's on? So I didn't check comments last couple of days.
We've got a lot of people with us. Gary Hoover, Kim Kim is our mod. Wendy DeLise. Void is not here. He
Oh,
generally
dude.
doesn't. He doesn't come on live. He
Oh
usually
my gosh.
comments afterwards.
Because I'll give him a shout out.
Kate.
I got to give Void a shout out right now because
Okay.
he actually is one of your subscribers, and I think he's a subscriber anyway. I don't really know his subscriptions, but I've seen him comment to your channel.
He writes to me all the time.
Void, if you're listening to this, I mean, honestly, you say some fantastic stuff. He is so knowledgeable. Anyway, I love getting a comment from him because it's gonna be really well studied, you know.
Oh, he's
and
a character.
And then you know who else at your channel used to one of your other people I'd see commenting, but I haven't heard from him else. Osama5 used to drop some comments.
He's
for a
right
while.
here.
Is he still around?
His name, no? He's Bila Lagrisi.
All right, Bila Lagrisi. Maybe that's why I lost track of you. But I do appreciate your comments, and checking out some of his music videos. I think
yes,
right?
he was here. I had a big party in 2018, and he was here, and he jammed here, and it was wonderful. We called it the "We Are So Fucked" party in a way because you see, you're still.
Oh, that's okay. That's what that was.
Yeah. You're still in a very well, more positive than a lot of us. We're a lot of us are very. We're just angry. We're over it because we don't see the change.
Sandy, I am too, but I coming on your show right now. I'm just feeling more positive. But I am too, though,
well,
and
it's okay.
Some days I'm like
listen.
you too, Sandy. Some days I'm one cranked out, dude.
But it's okay to be positive because we're still alive. And I always say, do what you can, and I always I espouse for local activism because the big stuff is like you can't, it's really hard to do. It is, and grow your own food. And people in our chat tonight, there's Rick Larson. He's a permaculturist, and there are so many interesting people in this chat that are like here. Chicken Foot Ranch. She's going to be a guest. She does more. She's not just a doomer. She does more. Yes, we do more because we do things locally and we grow our food and we do as much as we can. But let me ask you a question. What do you see between 2050 and 2070, let's say? If business as usual is happening.
So I don't want to bum out any young people watching. There's
no young people watching tonight.
You never know. And so what I see, I tend to avoid because being this like voice in the wilderness, dude. Like I'll give you another example. At one of my old jobs, I could see the same thing with the Iraq invasion, even the Afghan invasion. When I saw it coming, I think this isn't going to work out. Horrible. And I remember trying to be with my coworkers. And if you watch my video about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, you'll kind of get where I'm coming from with looking at our stuff with the military industrial complex, and just everybody so jazz up for that war, and it was a bummer. It was a real bummer. So I think for climate change, I've been talking about this and going from looking at for a long time, just the people around me, the random store clerk, the random coworker, and just even if I can just get through to people, this heat wave is called climate change. This flood you're getting, this is climate change. If I can just get that through, this is here and now. The fact, if you live somewhere that didn't used to have ticks and now does, and now you got kids and you used to go playing in the tall grass, but now you don't get a tick on you. This is climate change. This is real stuff. And just to show people this is here and now, I've tended to avoid some of that what's down the road stuff. But in terms of what's down the road stuff, what I haven't totally avoided. So I scanned through that fourth U.S. climate assessment that was released on Thanksgiving, when Trump was president, and a lot of people believed he did it or the day after he did it. Yeah. So it wouldn't get the attention. Yeah, that was the big thing.
Yeah.
And I remember scanning, they showed like business as usual versus not. And either way, this was a big, stupid waste of time to just keep ignoring people talking about climate change, keep ignoring environmentalists, keep dismissing it. It was a big, this is my bitter side because I've been put down, over my lifetime with this. And so, and it hasn't been easy for me in terms, I told you, my broken family background, I'm going to these right wing stuff to try to get my head, so I'm not feeling like a total, and so it's tough because I've seen it ignored. I personally have felt marginalized, personally felt like I'm not fitting in, I'm not finding my niche, I'm not in any of it. And to just see it, it's like that frog in the boiling water, to see it
I have that
heats
graphic.
up,
I didn't pull it up.
Yeah, to see that, and yeah, it's upsetting. So based on what I see from like business as usual versus, okay, let's cut back, which is like, wow, it ain't happening much. And yeah, it's like purgatory or hell, it's so no matter what, it's all going to be tougher to grow crops. It's going to be tougher to do everything. Best case scenario, it's just all tougher. Best case scenario, there's more storms. We're getting blasted and more unpredictability. And
that's the best case.
That's what I can see. And worst case, why bother with it? So I feel like the reason why I keep going is because, I care, and because I feel like I want to get the story told right. Because what's going to happen, and this, I'm working on a video about what's happening in Ukraine, and this is the underreported stuff with like the Azov battalion or regiment, whatever they're called, and these underreported stuff, just like it was underreported when I thought Reagan was the bomb, or the, no pun intended, the bomb, and Mr. Nukem there. When I thought Reagan was a thing, well, it was underreported when we were supporting those so-called freedom fighters in Afghanistan to help bring down the Soviet Union. That media did not highlight. And I was watching the news in those days. I always have. It didn't highlight these people. These are jihadists. It didn't highlight that's what we're bringing to life to break up the Soviet Union, which I think now was really largely just about privatizing their public assets, more than whatever principles I was told we're doing this for. That's how I see it now. Now, so today the media is kind of turning this dismissive eye about, these racialist or ethnicist elements within Ukraine. And the problem is it's a feedback loop. It's a social feedback loop, because as climate change comes down harder, people are they're gonna get stressed. And if they don't have our narrative down there, that, hey, this was brought on by not listening to people who are warning you. This was brought on by not scaling back that fossil fuel industry. This was brought on by not standing up to them. This was brought on by mocking visionaries. And I'll even put, look, Gore, I get it. People, Ralph Nader ran against him, but I really felt like, what, I get it. Corporate Democrat, both sides are the same. I get that. But, Gore, it's just like what Biden's dealing with. They can't go beyond where they can go. And they can't. If we, the people, make enough noise, they're going to go. And I looks like Obama gave into Keystone XL after we made enough noise. But I felt like Gore, he didn't have the charisma of Bernie, but I thought, he was really articulating climate change. He wasn't doing it the way Bernie would, which you need to. You got to say our country's, our government, our media is controlled by these business interests. That'll wake people up, because it's all conspiracy thinking now. But it's all like a fake conspiracy, which is aimed at defending these business interests. So I just feel like, the narrative's got to be, don't make fun of visionaries. And that is so through our media. How many fiction shows you're gonna watch, like a movie, and the bad guy, I can almost remember the name of him, but I just can't. It was like Samuel L. Jackson was in one of them, and they're I love it. Wizzy getting some bells, awesome. They're the bad guy who's trying to, like, it's actually this Godzilla movie. The bad guys are trying to save the world, but really they're the bad guys. Like they're. I remember there was a Godzilla movie. They're resurrecting the Godzillas to stop humanity from destroying the Earth. They're the bad. So they portray, it's right in the whole thing. People questioning the system are the problem. So the whole thing is geared towards protecting the system. So we need to get that narrative down that this is why the planet's heating up. There are solutions right under our nose, and they're not being taken advantage of. And we need to get that. Otherwise, people are going to be like, well, I don't know why. Because they're going to get stressed by these storms. They're going to get stressed by the heat, and they're going to be angry. And they're going to listen to the angry voices who want to stir them up. And that's why we need to get our story out, because otherwise it's just going to get uglier. You know,
But you
I mean,
say
it may anyway.
solutions to
Yeah.
me, it's a difficult word because for one, you give up one thing, like, okay, so fossil fuels, but then you're doing mining
Yeah.
for, you're digging up
Right.
Nevada.
Exactly.
Horrible,
Yeah, you are.
like Bright
You
Green.
are.
Do you know the Bright Green Lies by Derek Jensen? Have you ever read that?
I
You
didn't read it, but
probably should.
I get the concept. So here's the thing with that, and this is my take on it.
Okay.
And I, so and this is like, I'm gonna just say how I see this situation, because that's what I'm gonna do. And that's maybe one of the reasons why, it's tough for me to get a following now, because I'm not really exactly like, everything I'm saying right now sounds like, wow, this is like, democratic socialism and all. And so if I'm just
Well,
staying
I
in that
like it.
camp, I'm all set. But here I'm going to go almost now the other direction and sound like, green corporate guy. So
No,
I'm going to, because let me fuse it. Let me fuse
Okay.
it. So yeah, thanks. So and I'll take jazz here, So here's the thing with that, is that these issues, if you looked at, like, after Michael Moore's movie came out, if you look at these smog or these places, his movie, and I saw it, but I have to find the link, but his movie was featured at, oil and gas and those like reckless elements of the business community sites that want to promote oil and gas. It's featured there. Oh, those green things, a big bunch of bullshit. It's featured there. So they, and if you go on Facebook, some of these Facebook pages, and you see somebody, green lies, it could be someone who's sincere, which is, that they're saying, dude, you can't keep consuming and consuming. This is the problem.
Right.
Or it could be somebody who's like, vote for Trump. All this climate change stuff is bullcrap, and I want to demoralize environmentalists. It's used by them. I see them doing that. And that's something people need to be aware of. They will use our language to demoralize us, because it's not. So these solutions are like, dig up in Nevada and all that. Now is where we're getting into, like, where people really have to put their brain power to it, and where democracy is never going to be easy. There is no quick fix, and there's no other way out of it, because there's no way out of this, because unless you couldn't even say, let's have some kind of a get rid of democracy, it won't work. The public has, no matter what you got, the public has to go along with it. So, or it's going to crumble. So, with like the mining, environmental groups now, I just advocate, let's look at those position papers from groups like Sierra Club and NRDC, Natural Resource Defense Council, Unit of Concerned Scientists. Let's just look at their position papers, because it's just never, we're not going to. So I completely would agree with, let's just, that's the lesson COVID could have taught. Okay. So instead of having the lesson, green energy is a big scam, which is being used by people trying to protect fossil fuel interests and nuclear interests.
Yes, that has been said. And instead
of looking at, we could just look at, what do those COVID lockdowns do that people are up in arms about? Well, okay, if you could free yourself from everybody needing to make money, which we don't really need to, because as far as I can tell, this system is it's like 80% a big death machine and a big waste of time.
I need to hook you up with Adam Soul. Have you ever seen him? He's been a guest on my channel. I'm hooking you up.
Yeah,
he
that'll
is
be terrific.
the no money guy, and what happens. He's got the plan for
Right.
for civilization. I'll turn you on to him.
So that could be the lesson. But I really think it's like, people like us are it's good to be like, hey, and let's get that wind turbine up, and let's see how the NRDC or whoever is saying how we can site that wind turbine responsibly so the migratory birds aren't slamming into the thing. But think about the alternative. Your daily basis, every day you have to burn natural gas, so-called natural gas or oil or coal, daily basis. You got to dig it out of the ground, burn it, dig it out of the ground, burn it, dig it out of the ground, burn it. Nuclear energy, you got to take that uranium out, process it, refine it, fire up this power plant. So yes, there's two that we're lost in a materialistic morass, and that comes back to associative advertising and that kind of thing. But figure out how you're going to mine more responsibly. That's really as good as we can get, is just more responsibly. And even that would be a big achievement. Even if that was on the radar, that's an achievement, and that's tangible, and I don't begrudge that. And but I also agree that ain't the end of the game. But I think for the most part, as somebody who's like donated to, volunteered off and on for environmental groups over this lifetime, I'm not seeing them saying that lie that I heard in Michael Moore's movie. Oh, they're saying we can consume and change nothing, but just set up wind turbines. I never heard anyone from Sierra Club say that. I never heard anyone from NRDC. I never anyone from Youth Concerned Scientists. None of them say that. What I have heard say things like that would be, you want to get into your like corporate Democrats or whatever. They might give you the impression we can capture carbon and that, but
no.
You got them, the corporate Democrats, but I'll take them in office because they're at least saying they care about climate change. And at least in that party, we got Bernie Sanders.
And they're at least not as insane as the wacky wackadoodle Republican
they're going to tear it
cult.
out. They're going to tear down the whole thing.
The GQP cult.
Their climate plan is burn it down, and then we can be lorded over by, armed groups of dudes who are telling us they're protecting our freedom, and that's their climate plan. Everything gets stressed. People are crazy. People are getting nuts. I'm hot. I'm sticky. Sick. I'm irritable. I can't get food. And here's the local group of armed dudes who are protecting our freedom. That's the climate plan. And I got a lot of qualms with the Democratic Party, especially as somebody who is both more sympathetic with democratic socialists and somewhat sympathetic with these more traditional, kind of religious conservative people. Well, that's not fitting in. That ain't fitting in at all. So I could really have more personal criticism with these corporate Democrats. A lot of people criticize them, but I'll still take them in office. They lose
over the whack jobs.
Because we're not going to get climate. The whole Republican Party right now is locked down by fossil fuel interests. And Obama's cap and trade, it was better than not having it. And the Tea Party rose up, convinced people with Coke money, is what I believe happened, that they're taking their freedom away. So whatever we do, we're going to get smeared. And I just think it's really important to just give people a little space. Like, I never attack somebody who's trying in the right, in that, I don't know how to put it, in trying to get us to that healthier economy.
Oh yeah.
And I'm a little different than that. I'm like long-term survival of the species, but that healthier, greener economy is foundation to that. And
okay.
And I just want that narrative down there.
Well, I think we've been almost an hour and a half. It's
Get
been
out
great.
of here.
I have a few questions. I have some comments here, and then we're going to I put the ending music on, but first of all, there is Human has announced that March Friday the 25th for Friday for Future World Climate Strike, so we'll find some more stuff on that. And Chickenfoot Ranch, she asked, if civilization itself is the source of the predicament, how does any of this fit in? My contention is that we are addicted to civilization. And I kind of feel similar, you know, we're
Yeah.
addicted to civilization,
Mhm.
but
Yeah, that's really an interesting thought to
heavy.
like grapple around with. And I, so again, I'll just say how I see it, and this is how I saw it since I feel like around age 7 or 8 or something. So I maybe this would be continued, but I remember
Oh, yeah.
I was in like third grade is how I remember this, and this teacher put up like 3 charts of like possible futures, and this was still in those days people were more concerned about the environment, and then it's kind of coming back again now, but it's like things are worse and better at the same time. And one was these little like what we would think of as the environmental answer, but I always kind of like being a little contrarian, and who doesn't in our kind of crowd, right? And so it was really cool looking. These little like gleaming white little bubbly things set in a really natural setting, and then there was this like mega city and a bubble, and I forget what the third choice was, but I so okay, I know we're all supposed to choose the cute little, with it, and I said, but I'll just call her Miss Frizzle. What's the name of that from Magic School Bus? Miss Frizzle.
I don't know.
Yeah, Miss Frizzle. If humans are, if we are like kind of, if we're condensed in this big city, there potentially there's more room for wilderness, and then she's like, no, and I'm like, oh, but I'm third grade, dude. I'm like, aren't you gonna give a third grader a little credit for thinking here? So I've always really believed in diversity and in the true sense of the word. So I always fantasize, not how you'd ever get this, is that there's just space for people living really in harmony with nature, like the hunter gatherers. There's space for them where they're not getting harassed by people who want to log and dig in there, and they got a lot of space. And then there's space for people who want to live like the Amish, or just organic farming and really as simple as just with the earth. And then there's space for people who want to
I
live
live in an Amish county. It's
Yeah.
not always the way you think. Yes,
Yeah, well,
I
tell
love
me
the
about
way
it.
they
That's
live,
another
but-
topic.
Yeah, that is
all right. Let's
another
break my illusion. Break
All
my
right.
illusion of the Amish. Like,
No,
No.
I have to constantly make sure their
Where's my
animals,
Amish
the
bubble?
local people by me, I make sure that their animals are not neglected, because
Right.
that is a thing. And then they do cut down a lot of trees, and they're not
Yeah.
replanting them. Although,
Right.
my Amish neighbors are wonderful. I've been working with them to teach them a little bit, Jonathan, up the road, about climate change
Yeah.
and how it's so important that they have to replant what they are cutting down. So I don't know,
Yeah.
maybe my few neighbors have listened, but let me
Yeah.
get you another
Yeah.
question here.
Sure.
Gary Hoover. So degrowth and rewilding are happening. Whether we want them to or not, we need to let people know that. What are your thoughts on degrowth?
Yeah.
and
So
rewilding?
Gary, I'm going to say you're studied up on it more than I am, as Sandy pointed out. But I love both of those names because, rewilding. I mean, we wilderness. This is a key to all of it. I mean, those wilderness filters out all of this horrible stuff, this constant churning consumerism and doing, and then degrowth. Well, this is kind of my problem all along. Is how are people say, oh, economic growth, the economy. How are you defining the economy? If people are getting paid to spray, your job, this is growth, your job is to spray herbicides and pesticides on a lawn, and then that kid working for your company is going to get sick later, and you're making some good money. Maybe you paid your dues, maybe you got sick doing it too, and you're going around, your life's work now is to kill dandelions, which are an edible plant and have a flower on them. So to me, I don't get it, and that's your life's work, and that's called growth. I mean, yeah, this economic system needs to be questioned. Just judging by the term degrowth and the term rewilding.
Oh, there's a whole movement.
I think that's fantastic, and I should
There's a whole movement. Yes,
dig into it and put that out as solutions. Sure.
Yeah.
That sounds like solutions to me.
Okay. Let's see here. So that was Gary. Thank you for that. Anybody read? Tina's asking. I don't know if she's still with us, but anybody read Bill McKibben's New Yorker piece today? I haven't. I didn't read
I
it.
I
So,
missed it too,
all
but
right.
I
So
think Bill
we'll have
McKibben's
to
pretty
look at
neat.
that.
Yeah.
Well, we'll look at it and come back for that. All right. Then there is, hi, Mindy. Mindy, how many billions did our Congress just grant to fund active war, and yet our economy and ecology suffer neglect?
Yeah. Amen.
Well, that's
Amen. I mean, that's just amen right there. Amen. And that's where you get into where I
we
think
are warring mother effers, and we're
that's
not
where you
even
get
in a
into.
war.
So if you check out that video I did, the Ukraine, I forgot what I titled exactly, but the thumbnail, you're gonna love the thumbnail. Is I got wrong lesson, and then there's a bomb going off. I don't know if we got time, but we got time to pull it up. But in that video,
What's it called? Oh, wrong lesson. It's called wrong lesson.
The thumbnail is wrong lesson. The name, it's only my I think it's like second last.
Let me see if I got
It should be, there it is, wrong. I'm like pointing to my screen. Yeah, wrong. It's on it's right there with the bomb, with the A bomb going off.
Yeah.
So if you get so in that one, yeah, super Russian to Ukraine. So I think Mindy would dig that one, because I dug up a 1998 New York Times article saying that, that the defense industry, I'm going to paraphrase it now, was getting nervous after the Soviet Union's gone, and they were worried that they're not going to be able to make money the way they're making it. And this New York Times article said, I forgot the money, I feel like it was billions, but I don't remember exactly. But it's saying lobbying Congress to expand NATO. So there you go. From rattle our saber, threaten people, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I completely agree with that, and that is one of the ways where I've had friends on what I call the true left, like socialist and they're saying, hey, Vox Terra, you know what? Both sides are the same. And when it comes to the military-industrial complex, there's a lot of truth in that one. Now you got, Biden, Clinton, Obama, Bush, Cheney. Okay, so Bush,
yeah, but Bush and Cheney
Bush
really
Jr.
lied.
They were like, they went like a step beyond. They went a step beyond. And
he wanted to be a dictator. Bush said it would be great if he could be a dictator, and he firmly believed it. And you never notice these wealthy families are the worst.
No, they get no media play. They're long. I think Void actually commented on some long-term Bush ties, and I did bring that up too in that Ukraine one. So yeah, Mindy, I agree with you. It's totally tied in. Yeah.
All right, let's see here. Well, Osama Bilo, I know he has many names. Do you do accents? Do you do accents?
He knows I do. You must know that. You've been watching my shows for a while.
Do some accents for us to
Osama,
to close
how you
down.
doing, Osama? It's been how you doing, Osama? It's been a while since you have commented at my show. It has been a while since you have commented at my show, and I am truly missing your comments. All right, that's one. I got a bunch of them.
You were a puppeteer also.
So yeah, that's a good. So that was really like amateur with the puppets. Their mouths didn't move, and that whole thing
was
with
that
like
a thing
Copa.
Towards kids?
No, that was part of the problem, because Copa, this YouTube had, you probably didn't register for you because you're not using puppets. There was this big scare with like, if your stuff is aimed at kids, like all kinds of stuff can happen. And everything's political, how it's enforced. And that's the one problem. That's one thing where, these people are like anti-regulations. They got a little point with that, because you was set up for selective enforcement. And so when they started doing this stuff at YouTube with things aimed at kids, I'm just like, okay, I guess it's not worth it, because I got a message. And I like that, really, the puppets and that, because as Osama pointed out, I like to do different accents. I got a whole bunch of them. And really, it's another part of my personality that it's tough for me to fuse with this show, because political humor is usually you're mocking someone, and that doesn't work well for me, mocking people, with accents. I just don't do that. So for me, just to kind of randomly, I'm talking about, this hello rain with the Ukraine, and then I'm going to toss an accent. It's like, how does it work? I can't make sense of it right now. I would like to, though. And Yeah, that's that dream deferred stuff. That's like that dream deferred. I mean, you know, when I was younger, there was a period I was like the life of the party, or like, this guy's a riot, and yeah, a lot of stuff, man. I mean, I missed a lot of stuff, but here we are, and
Yeah.
we're gonna make things now the best we can, right? We just got to keep trucking
Right.
forward from today. Yeah.
And
Osama, thank you for
our
bringing up the accents. I
next
do love that.
show, you'll get a mic or something. I might even have something for you. I have extra, so you don't have to hold the cord or do that. I may have something.
Yeah.
We send around things to our channels. I help
Yeah.
people out in
Thanks,
many
Sandy.
ways, and people help me. So listen, it's been an hour and a half. My back is starting
Wow.
to
Oh my
kill
gosh.
me.
Time flies when you're hanging out
yeah.
with Sandy here. I did not expect it. I told you I was like sleep deprived, and I thought I'm gonna flat. You're gonna have to do all the talking, and then I'm like,
No.
you turn my switch on, Sandy.
You good.
Click that switch and just boom.
Listen,
Thanks
that's
a lot.
what the
Thank
whole
you.
point is, because
Yeah.
I bring you on not to hear myself. I do shows. Everybody hears me,
Yeah.
all my shows. So if I have a guest, I'm not going to talk over my guest. I'm going to ask you some questions. So I think, though, this has been a very nice conversation.
Thanks a lot,
and
Sandy.
we're
Thank you.
certainly not leaving feeling like we want to, shoot ourselves tonight or anything
Yeah,
like that.
thank
I mean,
God.
we're feeling good, and that's what we need sometimes. Yes, everything is it's critical. We're at a critical level. My audience pretty well knows that it's not a great future. But you know what? If you can reach people and educate them, especially younger people, with your show, which I do believe can resonate with a high school age type of group, that's great. Greta did it. And you're a younger guy. I mean, you're like a teacher.
Yeah,
You're a
I got-
teacher. You're
Right.
like a teacher. So
Yeah.
anyway, everybody,
The younger
Thank
thing
you.
is like that Lord of the Rings. He's got his ring on, and then he takes it off, and So, but thanks, Sandy. I appreciate it.
all right. Well, I want
Yeah.
to say goodnight to Fieldby and Patty and Matt. Thank you for modding, and Mindy. Thank you so much, and Morning, and Rich, Diana, and Scott Andrews, and Billy Joe. I thought you were leaving, Billy Joe. He better be careful. He's got some weather coming in. And Morning, and Climate Teacher. All these comments were great. I put them all over the screen tonight. Midas Lisa and Tom Hall and Mindy, and Bila and Midas Ken. And we have some new people, and Minnesota Prepping, who goes back with me very long time when I had long blonde hair. And who else is out here tonight? Bim Jib, and this has been a great Surfer Norm. Wonderful Sam Andrews. Thank you all so very much. Reflect the Sun. I loved it. I really felt this was easy. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you, Sandy. Thanks for
Well,
getting me
don't
out of my shell and getting me on here.
Good. Well, don't forget
appreciate
to
it, yeah.
subscribe. And if you feel that his videos can be shared with your nephews, your nieces, people that don't understand in your family they're not threatening videos. They're very well made. Okay? All right. So we're going to
Thanks a
say
lot,
goodnight.
Sandy.
All
Good night.
right. You can stick around. I play my ending music. Stick around, and we'll talk afterwards like I always do. Peace out, everybody. This is my thing. I'm an old-fashioned old broad, Peace
Peace.
out. Peace out. Peace out. Peace out. All right.